welcome to Everyday Moodlings. I'm your host, Jeree Parks, and it does seem like a long time since I did a video, so I'm excited to kind of get back to it. Recently, I showed you kind of my first go around with the Gelli plate and kind of what I thought about it. It's really a really fun tool, but I've been playing around with it more, and I've come across a couple of techniques I wanted to share with you. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to work with the Gelli plate, and we're going to work with paper stencils. So I will be the first to tell you that I despise cleaning paint off of stencils and stamps. And I know a lot of you will probably tell me, oh, don't worry about cleaning them off, just let them dry and as is, but for some reason that bugs me too. So, and you can't really do that with stamps. You got to clean them up or you'll lose the grooves after a while. So I started playing around with making some basic paper stencils. This one I've already painted with my Cricut. Now, if you don't have an electronic die cut machine, because you could do these really with any electronic die cut machine, you can also buy paper lace products at your craft store, so that would work as well. If you have the Cricut, my favorite cartridge for doing this is the paper lace cartridges. They work great. Sometimes my Cricut, I have like one of the original expressions, so it's not that great, and my blade is not all that awesome, so not everything cuts perfectly. You'll notice, well, it's a little hard to see in this one, but this one's better. You'll notice this piece didn't cut out. I don't really care, because I'm going to cut these up to do other things with them. So I'm using this in place of a regular stencil, so I don't have to clean it, but you can make some really interesting designs, not only on the papers that you use them with, but also on the stencil itself. And these are really cool to use in your background. So I was really excited about how everything turned out. So here's some of the prints I made. In fact, this one uses this particular stencil on here. Many times my first run was on pattern paper. This is actually one of my favorites. Not only do I use paper stencils, because I'm using the Cricut, I can create large paper die cuts too that I can use on here. So this is this die cut, which I think would be really fun to use on a page. So very fun outcomes with both the stencils. And then I also, this piece down here, this impression down there, is a paper, piece of paper that I ran through an embossing folder. So that's my other thing that I love. I can use that in place of a stamp, a background stamp. So I don't have to clean my stamps. And then these have pretty ink on them as well, or paint on them, so they're great to use for other things as well. So usually with these I'm going to get 2 prints, and this was the first print with that couple of big die cuts. I got a number of die cuts in here, and some stamping with the embossed paper. And then this one is the second print. And actually really like the second prints better than the first prints. It's all fun, but this, I really like these. So the second print I usually do in just plain cardstock. So I'm going to show you how this works real quick. It's pretty simple if you've ever used a Gelli plate before. And the first run, I'm going to use some pattern paper, and I think I'm going to use this stencil with this stamp. Now certainly there are other things you can put on here, but those are the 2 things I'm going to use in this demonstration. I'm also going to be just using some plain old craft paint. I've done it with the artist acrylic paint, which is great. I love using that on the Gelli plate, but I find that it dries a little too quickly, and then it's hard for me to get the stencil back up without ripping it, which again is not a huge deal, but doesn't always, I don't always want to have to mess with that too much. So because it gets wet with the paint, it's, you know, it's cardstock, so it's gonna become pretty weak once you get it wet. So I'm hoping that with the craft paint it'll peel away a little bit easier. Okay, so we got our jelly plate all ready, and I use the, I think this is like an 8 by 10, or yeah, it's not 8.5 by 11. So again, the Cricut is just a great option for cutting these pieces out because you can resize it. You're also obviously going to need a brayer, and then I just use a scrap piece of cardstock to clean my brayer off. Funny, it doesn't bother me that there's paint on my brayer. It just really bugs me when it's on my stencils. So we're going to be using a green and blue, and I like using just a little bit of metallic. I'm actually not a big metallic person, but I do like just a little bit in these projects. So you don't need very much paint do what you want to do here. I probably got a little too much on there, but we're just going to move it around. At this point, I feel like it doesn't have enough green on it, so I can always put a little bit more on. And again, because I'm using the craft paint, it's not going to dry too quickly on me, and that's actually a good thing. So then just work your brayer off over here. Now for this first print, I'm not going to, well, yeah, let's go ahead and use some metallic in here, just a little bit. I got a lot of layers on here now. Just get that smushed around just a little bit. Now we're going to go ahead and put this on. Now don't worry too much about smushing it down. I'm going to do that with the paper anyway. So, and then we can come back in here, just do a little bit of stamping. You can obviously do this before you put the stencil down too. And then it'll actually show up on the stencil. I got a little ahead of myself. Now we're going to take our piece of pattern paper and we're going to go ahead and transfer that print. And there you have your first print. Now because we're using craft paint, it may take a little bit longer to dry. Now we're going to carefully peel this one up, and it does release much easier with that craft paint than using a good artist grade paint because it doesn't dry as fast. It's got more water in it basically. So here is our paper stencil, and isn't that awesome? I just love that. That's such a fun way to color it. So again, we're going to set that aside and let it dry. And then we're going to get this last print off of here. It's just going to be awesome. And we have one more print. Now, I could have wet this down just a little bit more to get more transfer onto the cardstock, but I'm okay with how it came out. It's a really interesting, fun print. And I love the fact that it's paint. Once it's dry, it's going to resist any extra ink I put on there, which to me is super cool. So you never really lose the design, even if I want to get rid of the white paper. So that's how you use paper stencils with your jelly plate so you don't ever have to clean another stencil again. You can just go ahead and use them in your projects. So go ahead and I'm going to clean up, this is going to bug me obviously, going to clean the paint off here. Go ahead, pull out your Cricut if you haven't used it in a while. I made like a ton of files of different kinds of stencils, and large die cuts that I knew I would use in my work, like hearts, and I did some Eiffel Towers and other fun items and circles, tons of circles obviously, and I think I cut out 50 different stencils that I could use, so I got a long ways to go before I get them all used up. But it's a super fun way to create some interesting prints. Now obviously with this one I could go back and I could do more on here. You can do 2, 3, 4, but I prefer just a one print run, and then I'm going to cut it up and use the pieces and layer onto them. So at if you're on YouTube, go to the blog, you'll see a finished project with one of these backgrounds. If you're obviously on the blog, just scroll down, you'll see the finished project and what I decided to do with it. And then be sure to stop back next week, because I want to show you how to use these same paper stencils to make really cool watercolor prints. Because that's one of the things we don't really talk about with jelly printing is, well, what if you want to use watercolor instead of paint? Well, I'm going to show you how to do that with some really amazing results. So stop back next week, and if you have any questions, be sure to post them in the comment section. I'm always happy to help. And like I said, get out your die cutting machine and make some paper stencils and have some fun. For Everyday Moodlings, I'm Jeree Parks, and I'll see you next time.